All right. I think we're live right now. How2Boxing Minds. We have a great guest today, Mr. Ramsey Vesey, trainer of 12-time national championships. They've won 12 national championships. You can look in the back. He's got some belts back there. He's at a stable of successful amateur boxers and now pros, looking to go to that next level in the pros. And he's also even promoting his own fight cards now locally. He has a big vision and a big heart, and he's made a tremendous difference in his local community. And I brought him on because he has a powerful story and message that I think can help, many aspiring and beginning trainers out there, as well as seasoned and professional trainers alike. So welcome, Mr. Ramsey Vesey.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So let's get started, Ramsey. I know a lot of your personal story because we're close friends and have worked together over the years. But I want you to tell our viewers, where were you at in your life when you got started? How, why, and when was that?
Okay. It started in 2006. I was in barber college and I had about 2 months left before I graduated. And me and my father was talking, and he had just told me he signed two of my nephews up for boxing. At that time, I think Vernon Lee, he was at probably about 10 years old, 9 or 10, and Vershawn was 4 going on 5. So when he said that, I was like, man, that's a great idea. I had my 5-year-old Ramsey Jr. I'm like, I want to get him involved. So I couldn't attend it yet until I finished. I had about 2 months left. So as soon as I finished barber college, I started taking those 3 out to the gym in East Moline called the Visconti Tigers. At that time, being ran by Roger Bowman. May he rest in peace.
Absolutely. Good friend of both of ours. And Visconti's, that's a legendary gym.
Oh
Started
yeah,
in 1920 by
yeah,
Burt
oh yeah.
Visconti. And that's where I began my dreams. So we crossed some paths or had traveled some similar roads, definitely. So when you got started, now what was your boxing background? Had you personally ever boxed or anything?
No, my closest thing to boxing was just a relationship that, like my grandfather, that he had with his grandkids up to his sons. When you would come around him, the first thing he would do was slap box with you, so you had to stay on your toes, sharp, move your head. So that was my first beginning for the love of boxing. But I never got a chance to compete or join a program at that time. My stepfather, for some reason, I don't know why, he never told me. He didn't want me to box, so I didn't get into boxing.
Okay, so you really had no personal boxing experience, but you were a standout high school wrestler, I believe.
Yeah, I wrestled since I was probably about 9, 10 years old. Ran track, junior high, played football, high school played football as well as wrestled. So that was my thing. I'm for sure a athlete.
Absolutely. And the VC name, anyone listening to this in the Quad City area, you already know about the VC name. It's legendary with sports for generations, actually. So, and even to this day, I know one of your sons recently won a state championship. I believe now is a collegiate wrestler.
Yes.
And it just, the tradition just keeps going on. But the reason I ask that is there are a lot of coaches out there or aspiring coaches or guys, on the fence thinking about getting started, but they don't have any boxing experience personally themselves, or they have limited experience, if that. And they sometimes think that they can't do it, or well, how could I become a boxing trainer? And here you've trained 12 national, you've won 12 national championships amongst 3 of your best fighters, I believe. That's where those came from. Correct me if I'm wrong. And also built a stable of state, regional, championship, national, and even professional fighters now. But a lot of guys, they just don't think they can do it. And how did you do it with your limited personal experience?
I would say starting off is just with observance. Of course, I wrestled with it in the beginning because I was telling myself that hey, you didn't come from a boxing background, although you had family members that boxed, but you didn't. I just I was in my head a lot. I would sit beside you at times when I think my first one of my first kids amateur fights. You know, I was reluctant to work the corner by myself, and I'm like, "Hey, would you work his corner?" And I just paid attention and observed, and just kind of got out of my own head because I'm sitting there like, "Well, Steve is telling them the same thing that I'm thinking in my head." You know, so I kept, still wrestling with those things, and sooner or later it's just like, hey man, you got to get out here on your own faith, win or lose. The most important thing is that you're trying to mentor these kids to keep them off the streets. So that was it. I got away from that uncomfortability, and then it just made me more comfortable as I went on, and paying attention to different coaches, doing my own research. When I would go to the events, I just watched and observed different coaches, and at the end of the day, you got to leap out there, and trust yourself on your own faith. You
Right.
know,
Yeah, absolutely. I actually remember that fight, the fight night anyway, when you had asked me to help out, and you were with Roger then under Visconti Tigers back then, and I know one of the fights you really didn't need my help because I think I think it lasted one round. I think young Vershawn Lee, who's your nephew,
yeah.
who's now elite amateur and now pro, he got that fight over in like 30 seconds.
But for me, Steve, it was more about the respect for boxing. If it was to me, I just, like I said, it was a sport that I had no clue about, nothing about, no knowledge about, other than slap boxing, and it was my love for the sport of boxing, but it was just more of the respect, and I just felt like I had to earn that to be able to be in that position, instead of just getting out there and thinking I know. And and that kind of, even though it's a kid sport, growing, a youth sport, it's still, you could put a kid in danger, to get hurt. And that was something that I never wanted to
Mhm.
face, with having to explain to a parent that the kid got hurt, and then I'm looking at myself and saying, well, you lack that knowledge, you shouldn't have even been in that corner. So I think for anybody starting out, you really, yes, you have to trust yourself, but don't be afraid to seek advice, and get the information. And I did as much as I could to talk to any and everybody, or just listen and learn from anybody that's been in the boxing in this community.
I I agree, and one thing I observed of you is that you were always a student of the sport and still are continually learning and a student of it. And I think that's what makes great trainers is we never stop learning. And
Right.
even myself, I had a world class boxing experience in the Army World Class Athlete Program, and 18-year career personally. And yet, when I started training young fighters, I told them in the gym, I said, if I ever stop learning, then I fail you as a
Right.
trainer. The only way I'm going to fail you is if I ever stop learning. And so I think that's the key. And that's what How to Boxing Minds is about, bringing great minds together, regardless of experience, because I think we can all learn from one another and further the sport. And that's what this whole podcast is really about. But back to kind of your being uncomfortable without much, without any experience, other than slap boxing. Um, and you were you had that doubt in your own head and in your own heart at the beginning. And I understand the part about keeping children safe, but ultimately your heart was in the right place because you wanted to make an impact, on both your nephews as well as your son, and later it expanded into other students, other fighters. Um, but I'm sure that doubt you had in your own heart was, you've heard of this mirror effect. Sometimes it's like the things we see happening around us is really coming from us. It's like our own
Right.
inner doubts and fears. But then we hear this chatter, oh, he never boxed. Oh, he don't
Right.
have any boxing. So tell us about the haters, naysayers. You don't need to get in any names, nothing like that,
Yeah.
or even experiences necessarily. But just tell us about how did that impact you, having haters and naysayers out there when you were just getting going with no experience? You know.
I mean, that was like fire to your motivation, to to keep building and keep building and proving that you belong in that seat of training these young men and women. So that just was motivation. I never let the naysayers, because I mean I'm pretty sure I still have them to this day, with all the accomplishments that we've had with the boxing program. But I've allowed it to be my motivation, and just listen to my own self in my own head. It did just to go back to the very beginning. My foundation was making sure that when you got in that ring, the two things that I told the kid: you fear no man, you fear God, and when you get in that ring, you fight for your life. And that was the thing that I tried to instill in them more than anything. I mean, versus not having the skill level or the skill knowledge to basically instill that in the kids, is just more or less building that confidence up, and for them to just know that, hey, I shouldn't have to be afraid of anybody, whether he had more skill than me or not. So as far as what to anybody that's listening, you're going to experience that, and I mean that's part of life. You're going to always have critics that say you don't know this or you're not doing this right. Hey, all I could do is keep striving to improve, and what I didn't know, I tried to learn so that I would know.
Right. And
I can go back to my first time. Nate Jones, one of Floyd Mayweather's friends, and me and him was in contact a
yeah,
lot. And I uh, I asked him, I say, man, I want to bring them out to Chicago for you to work with them. And I have those videos on YouTube, and I took all of them out there to Chicago, and he worked with them. And then after that period of him working, I asked him, I said, what are they missing? And I didn't know at the time, when you're throwing that left hook to turn off that, that left pivot off that left toe, and throwing that right sit down on it, turn off the hip. And I didn't know those basic things. And he said, hey, man, they got it. He said they just was missing just the basic foundation to boxing. So when I added that in, that just improved my knowledge and skill to boxing, as far as now that when I got new kids coming in, I teach those basic things, those first basic things, you
mhm.
know.
That you mentioned the technical elements of boxing, and myself, I'm a technician, and I think that was one of my advantages from being an elite, world class boxer myself individually. Um, it allows me to have a very critical eye, and
Right,
that's where I became. I was a terrific fighter back then. Had captured 3 national titles, had fought, on Team USA. Went in the world, SISM championships, all these things. But when I retired, I swear I became a better fighter because I
true,
was now teaching it. And I
right,
think teaching stuff makes us learn it even better because you got to break it down into parts so that it can be learned by a beginner. And that's one of the things that I encourage. And I believe you did this yourself, but I encourage any trainer with limited experience. To me, the biggest handicap, because you're going to learn things, but to me, the biggest handicap is it's difficult for you to demonstrate things because you never did it. And so I
right,
think as a beginning trainer, I encourage you get in the gym and do it. And I know you had jumped in there and sparred and things like that, but I think I encourage any beginning trainer with limited to no experience, you got to refine your own technical skills so that you can look for the technical elements that Nate Jones pointed out to you. It just makes you a better teacher of it because you can now you've been doing it, and you don't need to have necessarily compete or all that. That's okay, but it's not okay to not learn the craft yourself. And I think that's something that
right,
really helped you is because you weren't afraid to jump in there. And I know you even jumped in there and sparred and stuff.
right, right. It taught me valuable lessons. I
Absolutely.
think I got in there my first time, and no Vaseline on my face, nothing, it got caught right here above my eyebrow. That scar is still there. It needed, like, I think, a couple little put the little butterfly band-aid stitches on there. So I mean, yeah, It just, I mean, I love it. It teaches you to really respect the game of boxing. I've like I said, I've done football, track, and wrestling all my life, and boxing it was something that I feel like it really it's something that really helps a kid in life. Period. And it's so many levels to it. Um, I can go back to the one of the things that I took into their training was my wrestling background. My uncle would grab us and he would bring us out there to his house, and it'd be me and four of my cousins, and he called a thing called round robin. And we went takedown, 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 and you stayed in there till you got took down, and we just kept going. And that was something that I used in the boxing, with them sparring. So that like I said, I got the athletic background. The boxing, I'm still learning. Um, I just try to take everything that I've learned from that athletic background and put it into boxing, as well as anything else that I could pick up.
I know one thing that you definitely stand on, and that's conditioning. And to me, that's one of the four pillars that any great fighter is going to need. You definitely need that. The system I teach, you have, conditioning, you got the IQ part, you got the technical skills part, and then the other most important part is self mastery. You know, and I think that's important. And I know yourself, you are not only a student of it, but also you're a leader of it, because I've seen you even doing some really, really powerful things with yoga and the
Oh
series
yeah,
you taught your young fighters. I wish I would have recorded that back then when you did that, because that was a phenomenal series of exercises and mind body connection and just helping them develop their own self awareness.
right, right.
I have another question for you. So, what kept you humble, grounded, and a student of boxing from the beginning to up to this day?
It was my first love. Boxing was really honestly my first love. So for me to finally get involved with it, um, it was like how do I put it? It was like a kid in the candy store. The only thing that I had to do in my agenda was to learn as much as I could learn to be able to train these kids. But boxing is, I mean, I could say it's been my life because something I've always loved, even though I never competed in it. But the humbling part was just watching these guys grow, and then coming from having, because we were out at Visconti's for about 2 years before it closed, and then being out in the streets and training and being in the basement of my dad's store that you came down there. We sparring between washers and dryers, and
Yeah,
um, going from that point, going to national tournaments and making it to the finals or winning that national tournament. Those things was like the humbling part that, like, okay, you are on the right track. You do belong. You're on that level. So those were the things that humbled me, and kept me in the motivation to keep going.
mhm. And you mentioned the no, training outside, and training in your father's basement of the store. Um, what were some of the other challenges? I know that's a huge challenge because you have to have a place to get started. Um, what were some of the challenges that you faced that, say, someone that don't hasn't traveled as far as you have now? You have your own gym. You're even promoting some pro fights now. But back to there, what are some of the challenges that you faced and that also they need to kind of prepare mentally for as they get into this journey of being a trainer?
I said the biggest one was the financial part because boxing is all year round, and on top of that, it's not like they're having a national tournament in Davenport or Moline or East Moline. Back those national tournaments are out in Las Vegas, California. The closest one to us was in Kansas City, was in Independence, Missouri, where we would go to ringside, and then that lasted about, I want to say, about 3 or 4 years. So it was the biggest challenge to us was more or less the financial part. Sometimes I had to push a bill back just to make sure that we got on that highway and was able to get up there, feed them, get a hotel, things of that nature. So to me, if I look back on it, that was the biggest part, was the financial aspect.
I agree, and I've been there myself with my very first gym. And the one thing I learned from a woman at the National Silver Gloves Championships when one of my fighters was fighting and competing in it. This woman, I'm trying to recall her name, but she's from Texas, and her husband, they had I think it's Baby Bull. They had the pro. He became a top pro fighter. I think they called him Baby Bull,
I think
Mexican.
I know you're talking about.
I believe he became a world champion, or at least I know he was up at that level. But we were talking one time at the National Silver Gloves Championships, and we just were talking about our fighters and our experiences and whatnot. And back then, I didn't charge a nickel, and I
Right,
took the kids everywhere just like you, and it was always a financial thing. And I did learn to write city block grants, things like that. So that started to help. I did fundraisers just like you, hosting our own boxing shows,
right,
did car washes, all that. But the one thing that she told me that stuck with me, she said, listen, young man, she said, this is a business. And she said, you need to treat it like a business. She said,
right,
otherwise you're going to go out of business and you ain't going to be able to help anybody.
right,
And that stuck with me. And I turned it myself personally, even after I had closed my initial gym, but then I never walked away fully, but yet I made it a business to even help support my family. I mean, I'm a school teacher full time, that, but I made it a business. And I know when you recently opened up your new gym and I came in there with you, that was one of the things I encouraged and helped you to do, was set up some business elements and
right.
charging for some memberships to to help fund the program. What has been the difference between prior not having those cash flow, because that's what we need, is recurring revenue in order to keep it alive,
Right.
but now where you're at, where did that ease the pain a little bit, because now you got some steady money coming in?
Yeah, it helps tremendously, especially when, I mean, starting out, it's you're relying on nothing but your heart, and you got kids, you got so many kids that's coming and wanting to be a part of the boxing, and say a family can't afford to pay that monthly thing, so it's like you don't, as a person that you got involved in this and it's in your heart, you hate to turn any kid away. Um, so I mean, but it helps. It helps big time. And one of the best things that happened with us was being able to an alderman at the time, Terry Brooks. He stayed right across the street from my dad's store, where he would watch those kids when we was training them outside and running them around the block. And he had an idea where he said, "Hey man, how about you bring your boxing program up under the Martin Luther King Community Center?" And I'm like, yeah, that's great. And he said they would help you with, getting your grants and stuff like that. So that when we went up under the King Center, that took a major load off of us, because we were able to now attend these big tournaments and and these events, and travel pretty much everywhere, off the grants that have received, that they were assisting us with to get. So that took that major load and that pressure off of us.
Right. And the other thing, one of the things you mentioned is about, say a family or a child that, they can't afford it. They really just can't. Um,
Right.
and even as a business model, and I know you're registered as a 501c3 status, you got the nonprofit status. And so you're able to write the grants and that, and you work with the King Center now. But even prior to that, even if someone has it as a for-profit business, you can still, in your heart, you can still always make that right decision and
Right.
serve a student or a child that isn't in that financial position
Right.
to take care of
And,
it.
and
But
we
my point is that we need to treat it even for yourself as a 501c3. The YMCA is a business. That's a
right,
multi-million dollar business.
right,
It got recurring revenue that allows them to stay alive. And I think that's critical for any boxing business. And that's why myself, I like the model of combining boxing fitness clients with
right,
the fighters. Even in that very gym where you're at, Smoking Joe Perez, on his last fight, we had people that are very, they were pretty well-to-do type people,
right,
and they're buying, 2 rows of front seat tickets for this year. And
right,
that's how he's getting paid, is by ticket sales on a local
right,
market like this. But it builds fans, it builds community. Some of these people got contacts and connections that we don't have, and so
right,
it opens new doors. And so I see a lot of people out there pushing. Boxing fitness is huge now. And so there's a lot of personal trainers or fitness trainers getting into boxing fitness that don't have that boxing, don't ever want to fight or whatever, don't want to train fighters necessarily. And that's cool. And they're doing that. And I support that because it grows boxing. But
right,
what I also support is local real deal trainers like yourself training real fighters. I
right.
also encourage you and others to open those doors up to capitalize on that opportunity to bring in additional revenue, funding. Who knows? Some of these people might love boxing and could become referees, judges,
Right.
and help, maybe even assistant coaches. So, what would you say about that
I
idea?
would I would say, for me, that like the same thing, get out your head. I mean, because for me in the beginning when it came to charging, I didn't want to because I didn't want the
Yeah,
community
I
to
put
feel.
you in
I know you and my wife. My
there.
wife would be on me all the time, like Ramsey, you got to charge, and it just I wanted the community to just see that hey, this is something that I'm doing from my heart. No, I don't get paid to coach. None of us do. So it was more or less a thing that I knew that I eventually I had to do it. It took me years because you was telling me for years. Like I said, my wife been telling me from years. Hey, you need to start charging. Um, I mean, you got we were in positions to where a parent would send their kid with no money, on these events, and we was paying that out of our own pocket. So I mean, when you start to charge, it helps a big deal because now you're able to not have to come out of your own pocket when it comes to getting equipment, especially when you got your own gym. You got to have supplies and things of that nature. So it does help. Don't be afraid to do it. Um, I would say be reasonable, but the other model that I love is one of the things that you've said where hey, I want if a kid or an adult is that wants to be like I said an adult that wants to be a professional boxer and or a young kid that wants to box and they don't have that interest. What you say, hey man, I can't take your money. I can't take your money. The kid is not really showing an interest into it. I don't want to waste his time or my time.
Mm.
If you're gonna come through the door, and I'm like that, I follow that model. If you come through the door, prepare to train. This is
That's
not a
right.
hangout spot. You coming in here, we're gonna work. If you don't want to work, this is not the place for you. Maybe you need to go to a different place that maybe fits more of your style and what you want from that particular coach or gym. But I follow that, and I stick to it. You come in here, let's train, because that's how I was brought up. We didn't come into practice and it was about playing, and no, we come in to work, and then you go home. So
Absolutely. And boxing is not, they say you play basketball, you play
right,
football. Boxers don't play. And
no,
boxing, the last sport for a child to be pushed into. I don't like to see that myself. It's just it can ruin a kid, I believe.
right,
So even, and I charge, I'm high, I charge high fees to work directly with me. And if a child is not, and I tell the parents right away, if the child is not interested, first I ask the student, the student, where's the interest? I want to know who's interested. Is it dad or mom that wants you to do
Right.
this? Or is it you?
Right.
And sometimes there's some situations where it's a thing where a child's getting bullied or where someone
Hmm.
don't have much confidence. And in that case, I'll bend a little bit. And I know
Right.
this I may never fight, and that's okay because I'm there for a different reason. I'm there to help them build their confidence. But
Right.
if it's someone getting pushed into fighting, I'm gonna tell them no. You're wasting your money, my time,
Right.
and this is not good and healthy for this child. And so I'm real clear about that up front whenever
Right.
I take on new clients like that in that situation. But let's get back to I have some additional questions for you. You mentioned getting under the King Center, and so they had a 501c3, but I believe you did establish your
Yeah.
own. And how did you do that to help others out there that may want to do that?
A gentleman helped me by the name of Vince Thomas. He, like I said, we were getting a lot of recognition for the things that the kids were accomplishing. When we get the stories we get done on us, and Vince contacted me, and that started that process of helping me to get the 501c3.
Right. Okay. And another question for you. How did you grow your fighters gym and program while holding down a full-time job, and not just a full-time job, but third shift?
God, man, God. I've been blessed. My dad used to always say sometimes like, man, why ain't nobody helping you and this and that. And I said, man, God gonna send the right people at the right time. And I would say that one of the right people at the time was uh, Jeff Perez. Man, he rest in peace. We started back when these kids were real young, and we would get together at least once or twice a week and spar our kids. So that started another level. That was like the next level now because all they had was just each other at the time. Our kids, just the 4 or 5 kids that I had at the time, so all they had was each other to spar. So now we started going over to Alley Cats Boxing. He had his gym to all the people that want to start his gym. He had his gym in his garage, and we had plenty of bang sessions right there in that garage in the back of his house, and that was the next step. And then, like I said, other people that came along, Ernest Upchurch, he came along that helped me with traveling because a lot of times when we had a tournament, I'm getting off at 7 a.m. in the morning, and we got to get right on the highway, and he would be the guy that would help drive to make sure we safely got there. So just people throughout the years, including you, that has helped, that's a big thing because nobody can do it by themselves. And I would say my biggest help was my wife
Mm.
because there was a lot of sacrifices that she made on behalf of my passion and my love for the sport of boxing. A lot of anniversaries and birthdays that we were at a national tournament doing. So that I have to give on behalf of that because been doing this for over what close to 20 some years, and yeah, she's been there every step of the way. Sometimes our main cheerleader, you know.
A couple things to highlight here. They don't schedule national championships around birthdays and
Oh
anniversaries.
no,
What I mean? They don't schedule around our personal
yeah,
holidays. Um,
no,
and the other thing with Jeff Perez, you mentioned, and he didn't have any personal boxing experience, but yet
right.
he produced state, regional, national champions for
Golden
Jeff.
Glove champion. Yep,
Yes, Chicago Golden Gloves champion. Um, he had 3 UFC world champions that trained in this man's garage.
yep,
Ali was a garage,
yep,
and he had that little what was it? Not kerosene, but propane
yep,
fire that would heat up that whole
yep,
garage in the
yep.
time. And we're in the Midwest; it gets cold in the winter,
Oh yeah,
but it didn't stop that man from making a difference. And you and I both were at his funeral, the hundreds
yep,
of people there to pay respect for this man's passing because of the impact that he had on their lives for
right,
generations. He was 20 something years, going on 30 years that he had been impacting youth in the community, and that man didn't. Now his sons competed, and he started as a dad, but he wasn't training his dad. Someone else was training. I mean, he wasn't training his children. Someone else trained his children. But he was in there kind of like as an assistant coach role because he loved boxing. He's one of the biggest.
Right.
I could get on the phone and talk for hours.
Yeah.
About boxing and his passion. He loved it. He just never had that opportunity growing up. And that's why I keep going back to don't let that stop you guys, because you too are two of the most successful trainers in this area, with producing champions. And neither of you had that personal, experience. So it didn't stop either of you from producing champions and making a difference. And that's what the message I really want to get across to our listeners is that don't let that stop you,
Right.
So I have another question, what's that baseball stadium vision that you had? Where did that come from?
Well, a reporter had did a story on our 3-time world champion Michael Nunn, and he predicted in that story. It was like a 3-page story, and he predicted that it would never be like that. Where Michael Nunn had did a fight, his pro fight with James Toney in that John O'Donnell Stadium, and it was packed. I watched the fight from the top of the bridge.
I was
And
ringside, man.
I was at top of the bridge watching it. And he in the story that he did on Michael Nunn, he stated that it'll never happen again. Not in 100 years, it would never happen again. And at that time, we were blessed to have a fighter at the time, Rashawn Lee, that was ranked #1. That I felt that the reporter had not done his homework or had not been doing his homework, because pretty much all the accomplishments that Michael Nunn had made as an amateur, Rashawn Lee has done as well, among some of the other boxers that we have. So I was like, okay, I'm that set the stage for me that I was going to prove that was my vision. I'm gonna prove them wrong, and we're gonna. That's my vision and my goal, to bring an event back to that John O'Donnell Stadium again, and show that it can happen, and it didn't take 100 years for it to happen.
I'm with you. That time I was a young fighter. I was a young boxer then, like about 15 years old. And we would go down to Rock Island. There was a gym down there. It was a different gym than your gym. No connection there. But it was called the Rock. I think they were called Quad City Boxing Club. And they were in Rock Island on 7th there at that. It used to be like a 7-Eleven or something. But we were down there sparring. And I was sparring Mickey Bates, who I believe is Michael Nunn's cousin. His first, I don't know if it's his first cousin or second cousin, but that's his cousin, who was an elite amateur himself. But he was making his pro debut on that fight. And we went at it, and he was like, "Man, kid, how old are you?" And I'm 15 at the time. And he's like, "Man, you got something." And it was just cool to be a part of that, because I got to see some of the behind the scenes stuff, being in there with some of those fighters that were going to be on that card. Michael Carbajal, world champion, who I had met one time before at the National Silver Gloves after he had competed in the Olympics. He was there because it was in Arizona that year, Prescott, Arizona. Actually, that's when Santos, a local coach, competed against Oscar De La Hoya in that same tournament. But it was cool to be young and to get to see some of the behind the scenes stuff. And I had bleacher seats, but somehow I snuck down there, man, and I was standing up ringside watching that fight. The world. And after the whole fight was over, I know Michael Nunn's our local hero and family here. And I believe direct family to Vernon and Vershawn Lee.
Yeah, he is.
But I met James Toney in the parking lot on the way out. And it was cool to see a new crown champion. And he was, he was a character, but he was kind and humble enough to talk to a young 15-year-old local boxer about boxing, just for us 30
Right.
seconds or whatever it was. I mean, he was on his way out, but his team was with him, and we got a chance to connect and interact with them for a moment. Um, but that was a phenomenal, like you said, that whole stadium was filled. The bridge was filled all the way across, connecting Iowa to Illinois.
Yeah.
There were binoculars.
Yeah.
Next time you're gonna be a lot closer though.
Oh yeah.
You're gonna be up in that.
God willing. God willing. We're gonna make it happen.
Absolutely. So I'm really excited, and this is your vision, and you planted it in my heart, and now I'm with you. I wanna see this manifest and happen. You know. So I have another question for you. How has boxing impacted the youth you've worked with and filled your soul, and not just
Uh,
in boxing, but in life?
well, I would say fill my soul just off of seeing, and I know you can speak on it as well. You see a kid come in your gym, and to me, it's boxing is not no other sport. Uh, they're terrified, coming into the sport and just you. They're not raised in your house. They don't know you. You don't know them, but you being in a position to convince those kids to trust you and to get explain to them, look, I'm not gonna let you get hurt, but I'm gonna push you, but I'm not gonna let you get hurt. I mean, a kid that ain't probably never had a play fight growing up, come in your gym and you see them 6 weeks, 6 months from now, and they're coming in now more energized and more confident. That feeds my soul. That's like the best thing. Even though I love a national title, but skip all of that. That means more to me than anything. Is just to see a kid that had lacked the confidence come in and their confidence get built. Because I'm like, hey, every kid that come in your gym is not going to be a boxer. I've watched, even being around with Jeff Perez, where a kid would come up to him he had probably not seen in years, and would come up to him and say, "Hey, thanks, Jeff." And Jeff, like, what? And he's like, "Well, because of you, I got my own business." And all of that was from boxing. So, to me, we're confidence builders. So that right there, man, is irreplaceable. I can't speak too much more about it. Is that I love the fact that we're in a position to help build a kid's confidence and to try to erase any doubt. Whether he's going to be a successful boxer or not, but just to have that confidence and to build on that confidence. To me, that's the success story there.
Absolutely. I'm in direct alignment with you. And even How to Boxing, that really stands for helping build champions in
Right,
boxing and life. Because as you mentioned, not all of them are going to be state, regional, national champions, professional.
right,
Some of them may never even step in the ring,
right,
compete. But yet, the access we have and the influence we have, and them being part of that culture, that gym culture, it can change their lives in a powerful, it can help them change their lives. We don't change their lives. They still change their lives by the
right,
choices they make. But we can be a part of that by providing that environment to help them grow into young men and women that just know themselves a little better and
right,
just walk into the room with a little bit more confidence. It can definitely change their lives.
right.
So, last question I have for you, Ramsey, is what would you tell or advise a dad, uncle, aspiring coach or trainer who's just getting started, and let's just say they don't have a gym close to them like you had a gym to go to. Maybe there's they just starting in their garage like our friend Jeff Perez, um, or maybe they're 50 miles away from the nearest gym. Or even more, what would you advise them?
I would say for me, really have a true passion for it. I didn't get into boxing with the mindset that I'm going to create the next Mayweather, the next Michael Nunn. That wasn't for me. I wasn't even thinking that far. The only thing that I got into it was that I wanted the kids to have an extra sense of discipline, know how to defend themselves. Everything else came later, but really have a true passion for it. It don't take much. We started with in the basement of my dad's store with like one little heavy bag and uh no dumbbells, no nothing, and then we put up a pull-up bar outside of the store in the backyard, and we would spar in the grass, spar in the streets. And I mean, so it to me just really have a sincere passion for it. I think people go wrong when it's like, okay, your mindset in any sport is that you're trying to create the next LeBron or the next, I think that deviates from you really wanting to know and learn and to be able to instill the right things in those kids. So really have a sincere passion for it, because that's what motivated me, was my passion for boxing and my love for boxing, and like I said, just wanting to keep them from off the streets and to give them that extra discipline.
Absolutely. Um, Ramsey, I really thank you for your time, and I'm in alignment and I'm part of that vision with you, man. I want to see that stadium filled again someday. And I know, like you said, God willing, it'll happen. And I really appreciate you coming on and sharing with these other trainers and just the boxing community as a whole. And if anyone does have questions, pop on. I have access to Ramsey. We can run it back again, or even do a Q&A type session. But do you have any handles that you would want to point people to, your Instagram or anything, or Facebook or whatever, where they
Okay.
can reach out directly to you if they had questions?
Yeah, we have a website, rockislandboxingclub.com, or you can reach me on Facebook through Rock Island Boxing Club, or contact me personally on Facebook through Ramsey Vesey. Um, and you can also, my number is 309
We'll
292
put that out. I will put your number out.
Hey
Yeah,
man, it's already public record. It's already out there. So
okay.
just
All right.
like I said, feel free to hit me up. Like I said, through my webpage or through Facebook. I try to answer to the best of my knowledge. You know, give me
Absolutely.
time, give me time to respond, because I'm still a third shift worker. So
Absolutely. I know that.
I I may miss it a day or two, but I will respond.
Okay. Hey, Ramsey, I really, really appreciate you. And I look forward to more chats like this in the future, and also just helping you, bring that vision to life.
Yeah, and thank you too, man. Thanks for having me on. Thanks, uh, number love.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ramsey. You can hang on. I'm going to hit end. We can talk for a minute.
All right.